Hey. 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 It's time to review. I was trying to think of something because I haven't made a slide to like be an introduction. So I thought maybe if I had theme music, that would be exciting for everyone. But that was the theme music I made, and I'm not sure that was exciting for everyone. I'm sorry. So anyway, we got 2 people out there in online land, and hopefully we'll get more, because I hope I have more than 2 students that want to review. I bet the rest of them will actually like watch this later and be having all kinds of fun. So I'm going to say, hey, everybody. All right. So let's talk about absolutism. And when I say let's talk about absolutism, let's talk about absolutism. Oh yeah, here we go. Absolutism, absolutism, absolutism. Okay. Wow. Ciao. Okay. So, boop, boop. All right. So, today we're talking about absolutism. We're going to focus on all kinds of fun stuff here. Okay. Oh, yeah. Did it not work? Okay, there it is. Whoa, we're in some kind of like weird Mobius strip thing. Here, this is what I'm going to do. Boop. Here I go. Here I go. Here I go again. All right. Girl, what's my weakness? Absolutism. Okay, so I can see the live chat, and I can also see my window. So let me just double check that this looks decently. But the problem is, as soon as I look at this, the act of observing will make it crazy. Yeah, okay. Boop. Okay. So, absolutism. First of all, we got to define it. What is absolutism? By the way, does everything sound better? Because it occurred to me that I did not have the microphone close enough to me. So maybe that was why last time it sounded like I was talking maybe further away. Anyway, absolutism is having absolute control over your people. And in this case, here, you know what I can do? Whoop. I can do that. And then I can share my, if I'm sharing my screen, then I'm watching myself watch the thing. Oh, no, that's not it. No, I want you to be small. Be small. Boop. That's my daughter. Okay. And then, boop. Well, that's not good. Okay. There. Okay. So how does this work now? Okay, stop that. Yes. So if I'm correct, what's another loop? Wow, that's crazy. Why does it go into a loop like that? You silly goose. Am I just so far behind that I'm seeing a loop, or is it actually looping? Okay, stop that. And then I'm going to just present application window. That will be that. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. The best part about this is doing it where you all get to see me messing up with my technology. Okay. Okay, so now I should be able to do this. Okay, still with me, Sahak? 5 watching. Oh my God, we got so many people. Okay, so we should be able to now move through these guys and have it be, I can still see the chat because I want to be able to take questions. That's important to me. Okay, so that should be displaying right now. Nope. Okay, yeah. Okay, so there we go. We got Henry the Fourth. And Henry the Fourth, oh, hi, Cole. Okay, so then we got Henry the Fourth. Henry the Fourth is an absolutist, and he's the one that kind of starts this whole idea of absolutism because it starts in France. And absolutism is the idea that the king, not the nobles, not the people, and unhindered by any laws, is kind of in charge. So Henry IV is the first guy. And when we think of Henry IV, we think of him as being a cool cat. We like him. He's a good boy. Okay? He is a nice man. He's known as Henry the Great. He helped out making sure people had enough food, paid for environmental improvements, stuff like that. But he also never called the French equivalent of Parliament and the National Assembly. And therefore, he was ruling basically on his own and not sharing that power. So a lot of times, as McKay says, he is referred to as laying the cornerstone of royal absolutism. So that's where they get that. Henry IV, of course, just a quick review on him. He is Henry of Navarre. He was a Huguenot that won the War of the Three Henrys, a French civil war, and whilst doing so, he then converts to Catholicism and gives up his religion. Having said that, some people are a little suspicious about him because one of his first things to do is pass the Edict of Nantes. Now, I was closer to the correct pronunciation just now. Nantes, Nantes, and basically the Edict of Nantes grants religious tolerance, at least a limited form of it, where the Protestants, or the Huguenots as they are called there, the French Calvinists, are allowed to have their own cities and they are basically left alone, which is a nice thought. I think that's a good thing for these poor Huguenot people. And Henry IV is actually assassinated by a Catholic who is a fanatic. He runs up on him while he's in a carriage, and I believe he throws a bomb or shoots him. I'm not sure which one. No one will ever ask you on the AP test. All right, now Henry IV, of course, lays the groundwork for the big-time absolutists, and really there are two. And one of them is Louis XIII. Now, Louis XIII, as shown here, is a child. And because he's a child, he's not ruling on his own. His mother appoints a cardinal to be in charge. And this cardinal is the famous Cardinal Richelieu. And Cardinal Richelieu is an excellent public servant. He establishes more and more power for the state while not increasing any of his own personal power as cardinal. Like, obviously, he's a powerful man, but he is not some kind of power-crazed guy that's going to try to overthrow the king. He's working for the king. So Louis the 13th is just the guy that's like, hey, I'm going to let you do this because first, as a child, I'm letting other people run my government for me. And then even as he became an adult, he realized Richelieu was a very clever man, and he was letting Richelieu do the work for him. Now, Richelieu does a number of things. For one, he wants to reduce the power of the nobles. That makes sense because we have absolutism, which is the king is dominant, the nobles are less so. Kings up, nobles down. So he appoints members of the middle class to serve as what are called intendants. And the intendants are a group of governors who preside over the 38 generalities of France. Essentially, he makes counties or districts or zones of France and divides it up. And the local representative of the crown, of the king, is this intendant. And these guys are never from the area because then they would be prone to being bribed. They are moved around after a couple of years, so you can never establish any kind of good bribery or anything like that if you're into that sort of thing. And basically, these guys are the way of keeping the nobles in check because the nobles, they can't influence them. They can't intimidate them. What do they have? If it gets out that the noble has undue control over this intendant, then the king could just be like, okay, I'm moving that guy. And all of a sudden, that guy is either losing his job or he's moving to a different place. Either way, you've got somebody new. So it's always a position where the nobles are in a negative position. Richelieu, and by default, Louis XIII, who was the king, also has a strong sense that France must assert itself in Europe by reducing the power of the Habsburgs. And you remember the Habsburgs are those fellas over there in Eastern Europe, and that is the Holy Roman Empire. Now, oftentimes, Mackay will conflate the Holy Roman Empire with Austria because the Holy Roman Empire's capital is the capital of Austria. And later on, when the Holy Roman Empire ceases to exist, the Austrian Empire is what we call it. So it would be smart of you to be familiar with both those for the Habsburgs. And of course, you should know the family as well. The picture is kind of what? Kind of what, Cole? Squished. Well, how can I make that better? What happens if I do this? Well, then I can't see it. How do I make it? Well, do you really need to see the picture, Cole? Is it important to see the picture? I just kind of was using it as something to keep so everybody would know how to spell stuff, and also I'd have like a little guide for like, oh, okay, this is a guy that I want to talk about now. Maybe if I get rid of all of the toolbars. Nope. How do you do that? Oh, no. Hey, if somebody knows how to do this, it's okay. Okay, Cole, you're causing trouble, but I forgive you. I forgive you, Cole. How about that? Is that bigger? Is that good? How about that? Is that good? Is that better now? See, I can't look at it because every time I look at it, the act of me looking at it makes it move, which means I can no longer look at it. Frustration. All right. Anyway, so how is he going to implement this whole thing? The arrow in the top right corner, that's in a box. Oh, hi. Auto hide ribbon. Woo. So like that, I don't really want to. Okay. Hmm. Like that. No, Cole, I want you to be happy, my friend. Okay? I want you to be happy. Cole, is that you from fourth period? Or are you a different Cole? Okay, how does that look now? Does it look good? Whoop. Yeah, it looks good. I had to look really quickly before it changed. Okay. You're fine. You're fine. All right, I'm sorry. So he wants to control the Habsburgs to limit their power. And how does he do that? He is going to go to war. What war? Does anybody remember what war that Richelieu goes into as a way of limiting the power of the Habsburgs? It lasts for a finite period of time. That's maybe in the title of the war. Does anyone know? There's like a 30-second delay, so I feel awkward not talking during that 30-second delay. Anybody know what war? Richelieu, he supports someone from Bohemia. Well, now I don't know if I guess you guys don't know. Okay, well that's okay. I forgive you. It's the 30 Years' War, and Richelieu will send over troops in order to help out with his goal of keeping the Habsburgs down. It, okay, do you know now? Because I just told you, 30 Years' War. So 1618 to 1648. So Louis the 13th is technically the king of France during that war, but Richelieu is the one pulling the strings. He's the one guiding policy, we would say. So anyway, Louis the 13th, not as important as Richelieu. Now, Richelieu is going to do another thing. It's going to be religion oriented because he's got this idea: one king, one law, one faith. And by doing one faith, he says, we all got to be Catholic. What about the Edict of Nantes? Oh, well, the Edict of Nantes said religious toleration for the Protestants, for the Huguenots, and they get to have their own cities. Richelieu says, listen, I can't get rid of that, and Louis XIII doesn't want to get rid of it. So here's what I can do: make compromises in order to get rid of it. So I'll just make life heck for those Protestants. Sorry for the bad language. And he sends in troops to take down the fortified, the walled cities of these Huguenots. Says, you guys can't have fortified cities anymore. And the most famous example of this is La Rochelle. And La Rochelle, he personally goes to assist with that. All right. After he did, a new challenger appears, and that is Louis XIV. Now, Louis XIV is a must-know on the AP test. So far, the guys I've talked about, you should know them, but you don't have to know a ton. Cardinal Richelieu is a you need to know a lot kind of fella. It's not the Great Time War. Louis XIV, God, do I have such a delay that's just now coming back to the question? Peter's just now got that question. What's the name of the war? Oh my goodness. What's this delay looking like? Anyway, Louis XIV is the Sun King. Everything revolves around this guy. He is famous for saying, quote, I am the state. Therefore, he is the epitome or best example of royal absolutism in Europe. As such, anything Louis wants, Louis gets. Louis is obsessed with war, constantly trying to make himself a bigger, better monarch by conquering stuff. In reality, he loses a lot, and it costs a ton of money. That's one of the reasons that France is bankrupted and is not able to respond to the demands of the later 18th century. That'll be the French Revolution. And Louis XIV also has trouble with his own appetites for building. He spends tons of money building a famous palace. Now, I'm going to talk about the palace, but if you know what the name of the palace is, go ahead and shout it out. He builds this palace where nobles have to reside for at least part of the year. And that way he can separate those nobles from their land. He can control their schedule. He divorces the nobles' power and gives them instead influence. Versailles is exactly right. It is Versailles. And Versailles is famous for all of its gardens, which all are controlled. In fact, I made an analogy earlier this year, I shall make it again, that nature itself is brought under the control of Louis XIV. The French style of gardening is everything is exquisitely manicured, controlled as much as possible. This is contrasted by the English idea of 17th century gardening, where things are a little bit more like, hey, whatever goes, goes, man. Trees are supposed to look like regular trees. You let them kind of grow over a little bit. So everything's not perfect. It's more natural looking. So Versailles is actually, it was a hunting lodge first, but it looked nothing like it does in these pictures. And it is a gorgeous, gorgeous place. Wonderful, extraordinarily expensive. Everything is top-notch. Think about it. How could Louis XIV say that I'm the most important thing in France and not have the most grandiose palace in all of Europe? In fact, other people are going to try to copy Louis XIV's palace. Louis XIV becomes such a trendsetter that other countries actually start using French as the language of diplomacy. So even in their courts in Prussia, everyone speaks French, just because Louis XIV is such a G. Well, Louis XIV, we already talked about his wars, for the most part unsuccessful. The biggest war, you should know he's involved in lots of wars, but the biggest war that you should know about is the War of the Spanish Succession. And this is an attempt for Louis to get more influence over Spain. And he does this when the King of Spain, whose name is Charles II, Charles literally meaning manly, when Charles II is dying, and due to a birth defect, he is not able to make any babies. Well, now we have a situation of, well, geez Louise, what are we going to do? Who's going to take over the throne of Spain? And Louis suggests his nephew. And a lot of people are freaking out about this because they're like, we can't have a Bourbon. Remember, that's his last name. The Bourbon dynasty began with Henry IV and continues with Louis XIII, Louis XIV, and all the other Louis you can think of. And he says, my nephew could do it. His name is Philip. He's from Anjou. And everybody in Europe gets all crazy. They get all like, oh, no, 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 Louis XIV, you did not just suggest your nephew. He's all like, what if I did? I'm going to let some smack down upon you. And he does. He lays smack. But the problem is he's going up against almost every other major power in Europe. He's soundly defeated, and he is not doing well at all. Why did you say super delay? Peter, sometimes I'm confused by you. You just said super delay, and yet just a second ago, Cole said he was ugly, and I'm assuming he was talking about Charles II because Cole is a great scholar who remembers exactly what every king looks like. So that doesn't sound like there's that big a delay. Are you having a personal delay? Maybe you're delayed. Maybe you're taking a flight and you're just telling me you're delayed. I don't know what you're saying, kid. The way that Louis controlled his nobles, conclusion of the War of Spanish Succession, he was unsuccessful, as I kind of intimated. And at the end of the day, France has no influence over Spain. Although, just to be confusing, Philip of Anjou does still become the king of Spain. He simply has to sign a treaty that says he will never make an alliance with France. This is why we have the French Bourbons, and then we have the Spanish Bourbons, who will continue for some time over in Spain. Actually, all the way towards the 20th century. Louis controls his nobles at Versailles a number of different ways. And a good question for the test would be like, how did Louis control his nobles or something like that? You could answer that by saying he read their mail. Not personally, he had people to do that. He rewarded tattletaling and spying. So if you were to get some gossip on someone else and share that, Louis would love it. Ba 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 ba, he'd love it. Louis was all about using that information against people. So by wedding the whole idea of nobility with grandeur and all these ceremonies that you had to do, he could be like, oh, you know what? I noticed that Monsieur so-and-so is not here today. Perhaps he's off gambling. And like everybody be like, oh my God, Louis, what's going on? He's like, yes, I'm going to destroy his reputation just by mentioning all of these things I know about him from gossip. And yeah. Louis XIV, in addition to gossip, he revokes the Edict of Nantes. Who's Eva TV for loaves? Lols. Whoa. Oh, is that you, Jeremy? And he controls his nobles, figures the best way to control them even more would be to fully make Protestantism illegal. And the way he makes Protestantism illegal is he makes it so that the Edict of Nantes is revoked. No longer can Huguenots have freedom of religion. He's carrying out the whole idea. Oh, okay. Hi, Eva. He's carrying out that whole idea of one king, one law, one faith. And that was something that Richelieu had kind of begun, that Louis XIV is continuing. Other than that, Louis, culturally very important. The wars, obviously, it's a thing. The way he controls his nobles. But think of it this way for these reviews. It's one of those things where if you don't remember like what I'm talking about, if you're like, oh yeah, I remember he controlled his nobles or something. That sounds right, but I don't remember. You can go back. You're going to need to, after this, presumably, go back and re-watch that whole lecture where I go into lots more detail, and or reread the book. Ideally, doing both with every topic that you feel bad about, like you don't feel like you know very well. Here is the famous Hall of Mirrors in Versailles. That's a place I threw up. And let's move over to Russia. Mr. Oliver, what about Louis XV or the later Louis? Louis XV is an interesting cat because he tries to be an absolutist, but there's pushback on that. And he loses a lot of his as a result. He is limited by the French courts. The nobility resists his taxation. He's not half as intimidating, apparently, as Louis XIV or Louis XIII were. So if the people are gaining rights, he's less of an absolutist. Let's jump over to Russia. That handsome fellow right there is Ivan IV. He's your first good example of an absolutist because he fits our categories, I guess you could say. For one, he controls his nobles. How does he do that? Well, he brutalizes them, tortures them, at one point releases rabid dogs to kill one of them. That's when he's younger. When he grew up, he was a little bit meaner. He would scare the heck out of his nobles. And of course, nobles in Russia were named boyars. I'm going to spell boyars just so y'all know what that's all about. Boyars. Uh-huh, that's a boyar. So, Ivan the Terrible. Now, the thing about Ivan the Terrible is he's very interesting, but for the AP test, I really can't imagine that they're going to throw too much out about him because most of his stuff is dramatic, sure, but I can't really say that it's a great example of absolutism or anything like that. For that, you really should be going to first Mikhail Romanov, who kind of bridges the gap, starts the Romanov dynasty, but then Peter the Great. And Peter the Great is a fantastic, I was going to say great, but fantastic example of an absolutist. I can't promise you there's going to be a question about absolutists, but it would be great if there was, because it's something they could say something like, uh, describe the tactics of two absolutists and explain ways in which they were effective and one way that they were not. And that would be a wonderful short answer question, maybe even a long essay question. Peter the Great is also like Louis, so let's say similarities, goes to war a lot, primarily concerned with going to war with Sweden of all places, and he wanted to control territory in the Baltic. He wanted to control a warm water port. And that is, of course, where he will ultimately build St. Petersburg, which is a brand new Baroque city based, in many ways, off of the grandeur of Louis XIV. Peter the Great, as a younger man, not influenced culture like Louis did, but instead he tries to learn culture from other people. He travels all across Europe, pretending to be incognito, pretending he's not Peter the Great, but he was a 7-foot guy with a pet monkey. So I imagine most people remembered who that guy is. It's like, hey, that dude with the Russian accent looks just like Peter the Great is supposed to look. Remember, they didn't have pictures, so it'd be like supposed to look. People like, shh, he's trying to pretend to blend in. So Peter the Great, very interested in shipbuilding, very interested in Western education. He believed that they needed to westernize in Russia. And when I say westernize, change their culture to be less like Asia and more like Europe. In order to do that, he will change things about the culture. So Louis XIV, he was famous for his changing the culture. Peter the Great also. Now, the way they do it is different. Louis XIV embraces French culture and becomes a great example of French culture. Peter the Great is going to be a little different. Peter the Great is going to say, "Yo, guys, I don't like the way I don't like your style." So, looking at this political cartoon, what act of the Tsar, of Peter the Great, the Romanov, what act is this showing? It's showing that people in Russia had to do what and why. Go ahead and answer right now, please. Also, I'm checking my delay by asking this question because I assume it's an obvious answer. But ooh, that delay. Does my voice line up with the slides you're seeing? Exactly, Cole. Cut their hair to be more like Westerners. You guys remember that? It's because it's weird, right? It's unusual, and facts like that are very helpful because it's kind of like, yeah, exactly. They wanted to be like Westerners, so they didn't like that. Obviously, they had to change their style of dress. They had to dress in a more European fashion, so they fit in. And ultimately, they were even supposed to send their kids to Western schools in order to be educated. Because, of course, Peter highly influenced by the West. He says if we want to become like the West, we got to bring in experts from Europe. We got to adopt as much of their style as possible. He even brings in military advisors to make his army more Western. And of course, his city. Who is it named after? This is a trick question. Who is St. Petersburg named after, according to Peter the Great? As you answer that, I'm going to tell you some things about the city. Notice it is typical of a 17th century city in that Baroque style. Everything is big and fancy looking, broad avenues for the horses and carriages and stuff to go whooshing by. There's tons of detail on all of the faces of the houses, and everything kind of has a central hub, much like Paris does, where everything is built around a center, and that center is supposed to represent like the most important part of the city. And of course, there's Peter's Palace. This was relocated from Moscow so that he could be closer to Europe. It was his quote-unquote window to the West. All right, nobody answered. So either our stuff is crazy, crazy delayed, or you didn't know. This is just a trivia thing. St. Petersburg is named after St. Peter from the Bible, from the book of Peter, Gospel of Peter, sorry. It's not named after Peter the Great himself. A lot of people think it was. It wasn't. Who else should we know as far as absolutists go in Russia? Those Ruskies. How about Catherine the Great? Catherine is great. This is Catherine II. Oh, you do not know. The delay is not bad. Oh, excellent. Good. So Catherine the Great is often referred to as an absolutist, but usually she gets an extra name in front of that, an enlightened absolutist. And it's because Catherine reads stuff from the mid-18th century. We're jumping ahead in time a little bit here, but I'm going thematically. She reads stuff that's being written by Voltaire. She reads stuff that's being written by Rousseau, guys like that. And she's reading the work of the philosophes. And the philosophes challenge established things. Again, Peter, you have confused me by typing cannot function. What does that mean? Please clarify. So, Catherine the Great, she is actually the one who publishes the famous encyclopedia. But your system is broken? Or, oh, okay. You're just a robot now. Okay. The encyclopedia, which is written by Denis Diderot, is published in, well, they were trying to publish it in France, written in France, but they won't publish it because it's very controversial. It has a lot of interesting ideas in it that don't place religion at the top. It has articles that don't judge atheism as being wrong. It discusses things that are not correct for polite society, like, for example, blindness, which in the French language starts with an A. And the only reason that the encyclopedia is able to be published is because Catherine actually has it published in Russia and then sent back to France, where there's the highest number of subscriptions. Peter, you're kind of spamming the chat, my friend. I don't know if you're actually trying to tell me something. It looks like everything's working. I just moved the window. It still looks like it's functioning. So I'm sorry if you're failing. Okay. So Catherine is a really enlightened absolutist. So that means that she cares about what these people are saying, and she wants to make the lives of her people better. There's a lot of conjecture that she actually wanted to get rid of serfdom in Russia, which was highly criticized by these Enlightenment authors. However, there was a revolt by a guy named Pugachev, And Pugachev's revolt convinced her the people were not ready for it because this guy showed up, claimed to be Catherine's dead husband, who was still alive. Of course, that's not true, and tried to lead a revolt. She was like, nah, 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 not sharing my power. And she shut him down. Catherine is also notable. Okay, Peter, stop spamming my chat. Catherine is also notable because she does some very unenlightened things. For example, best example probably, she partitions Poland. They have this state of Poland, which is to her west, obviously from Russia, and she says, "Look, let's work together, Austria and Prussia, and just take it apart." So, with no care to the people of Poland. Yes, Sahak. Peter the Great was the guy who made them shorten their robes. They had to dress in a Western style, and they used to dress with longer Eastern style robes. Yeah. Don't worry about punctuation. I know what you mean. Peter, I don't want to have to dump you from the thing, but I can. I can put you in timeout. And I did. I put him on timeout, Cole. Don't worry. I don't know how long that lasts. Do I have to take him out of it? 300 seconds. So, Catherine the Great, sorry, I lost track because of Peter spamming. Catherine the Great is, what was I talking about? What was I talking about, guys? What was I talking about? I started a story. I want to continue with that story. Oh, she partitioned Poland. That was what it was, huh? So she partitioned Poland, not very enlightened, didn't end serfdom, doesn't share power very well. So she is enlightened, but it's more, it doesn't really help the people so much. Although we will see there are examples of rulers that did help the people more. Let's jump over to Prussia and look at this handsome fella. Frederick William the Great Elector. Okay, pop quiz. Was Frederick William the Great Elector a king? Answer that question right now. It's a yes or no. Don't say I don't know and don't not answer. So Frederick William the Great Elector is from Prussia. He is in power towards the end of the 30 Years of War, which you may recall was between France and the Holy Roman Empire. He is called an elector because he was one of the most important people. You're right, Cole, he wasn't a king. He was one of the people that elected the Holy Roman Emperor. And that's not really an important thing as far as a duty, because it's pretty much just goes to the nearest male relative. It's more of a symbolic thing. Anyway, Frederick William the Great Elector was a dude that was taking advantage of a bad situation. Prussia really had been messed up as a result of the 30 Years' War. It really was looking bad there. So Frederick William says, hey, you know what I can do is I can try to use this time to maybe make a little power play here. So he raises taxes. He takes over a little bit more land nearby. And next thing we know, Prussia has gone from kind of an insignificant German state, one of many hundreds, to a very interesting state. Now, after Frederick William the Great Elector, there will be another elector, and that will be Frederick III, who becomes the first king of Prussia. So they rename him as Frederick I. If you don't remember that guy, it's okay. And then we get Frederick William I. Do you notice that they put Frederick William I instead of Frederick William the Great Elector? They're distinguishing. I promise you, on the AP test, every time you see Frederick William I, you will either see a Roman numeral behind, or you will see the Great Elector in order to help you distinguish. Frederick William I raises taxes and makes the finest army in Europe. He makes Prussia go from being a okay power to the greatest military in Europe. But the funny thing about him is he's not interested in using that power in order to control people he wants to use them to control people, not to go invade people. He doesn't want to invade anybody. Cole, I know there's a bunch of Fredericks. I'm trying to only emphasize the most important ones. Frankly, the only three you really need to know are Frederick William the Great Elector, Frederick William the First, and Frederick the Second. Okay, and I'll talk about Frederick the Second in a minute. You just need to memorize those three, and I know it's not easy, and it's just one of those things where even if you make a mistake on the AP exam, they're not going to hold that against you massively. Like on a multiple choice, obviously, it's right or wrong. But in an essay, if you're describing Frederick William the First and you accidentally say Frederick the First, they're going to be like, oh, kid just made a mistake. And they'll give you the benefit of the doubt. You're probably not going to get a perfect score on your essay, but they'll generally be forgiving about what happened. Does that make sense? Does that help at all? I mean, a lot of stuff in European history, like all these Louis, all these Frederickses, a lot of them you just got to memorize. It's just hard memorization. And it's hard because people have access to all this stuff on phones. So in many ways, it's like, well, yeah, do we really need to memorize these things? Like if I just know the general stuff, I could just look it up. And hey, I'm with you, except that they're going to ask you on the AP test. So you got to know them if you want to get a 5. If you get mixed up, you're probably looking more like a 3 or 4. That's all. So Frederick William is known as sometimes creating the Sparta of the North. In other words, of Northern Europe, he is getting like a Sparta. So think back to 300. Think back to your hardcore army that isn't really concerned about the happiness of its citizens. The whole culture revolves around the military. And again, he never goes to war with his military. He doesn't want to lose his soldiers. This is the guy that is obsessed with tall soldiers, to the point where children, if they were growing a lot, the moms would be like, oh, hey, you better stop growing or else Frederick is going to take you for his army. And he probably would, quite frankly. He was kind of a savage like that. So there's that. Frederick William, what else? Frederick William the First doesn't go to war a lot. His son is this guy who you've heard of, Frederick the Second. That's not how he looked as a child. That's how he looked when he got older, of course. But Frederick the Second, aka Frederick the Great, is a guy that is really important. He's an enlightened absolutist. He will actually use his father's army twice, whereas his dad didn't ever want to use the army. Frederick II will use the army in the War of the Austrian Succession, where he invades Austria because a woman is taken over, and we'll talk about her in a minute, Maria Theresa. And he's like, haha, I'm taking your land. And he takes the province of Silesia. And he also will actually be attacked by Austria during the 7 Years' War. And in the 7 Years' War, he will still prevail. He has an unbeaten streak. He's thought of as being this great military genius. In many ways, that's true, I guess, but also he had a fantastic army. It's a lot easier to be a military genius when you have the best army in the whole continent, rather than having the worst one. He really becomes enlightened after he decides, I got to stop with all this war stuff and focus on my people at home and making their lives better. I need to create an atmosphere of religious toleration. That's super enlightened. The idea of trying to help the people and listen to what the philosophers are saying about natural rights and things like that. He also is good friends with many philosophers, including Voltaire, who actually lives with him in his palace. And guess who Frederick II's palace is modeled after. If you said Louis XIV and Versailles, you would be 1,000% correct. So Frederick II is he's a good boy that is very tolerant. Now, when I say religiously tolerant, I do want to note not towards Jewish people, because although he probably did better than most, he's still not super tolerant towards them. Although there is a philosopher named Moses Mendelssohn, who is part of what they call the Jewish Enlightenment, which is kind of a subgrouping of the Enlightenment, where different Jewish intellectuals were talking about the issues of the day and how to live a better life and things like that. And he complimented Frederick the Great. Frederick the Great has also gotten compliments because he was a big advocate of freedom of speech. He was like, I'm never going to censor anybody. He actually had a subscription to the encyclopedia, just like Catherine the Great. But, as we said, he's still very focused on war, and he's still using his army to, do some bad stuff with, like, invading Austria. That's not so polite. Speaking of Austria, well, like I said, speaking of England, let's hop over to England. I thought Austria was next, but then I remembered I wanted to talk about England, so I cut and pasted them into my thing. And now here's James. Actually, I don't want to talk about them yet. Let's just jump over to Maria Theresa. Okay, she's Austria. And Maria Theresa is, it's not like she's the first woman to ever become queen. They were concerned because they knew she was next in line. And they were like, look, awkward. You're a woman, and people are going to perceive you as weak. And therefore, no offense, but awkward. We're going to have to try to protect you by forming what's called the pragmatic sanction. And the pragmatic sanction is going to create a law that says that the Austrian provinces are never to be separated again. What happens immediately as soon as this woman takes power? Fellow enlightened monarch Frederick the Great attacks. And so Maria Theresa immediately starts off with an L on her resume. She does do some good things. She's not religiously tolerant, so that's a strike against her. She's a hardcore Catholic, as you would expect from someone who is the head of what we call the Holy Roman Empire. She is very religious. She does encourage science, including, this is always a weird example, but this one sticks with me, that she has this obsession with allowing autopsies because she wants to figure out how to improve the health of her people. She also toys with the idea of getting rid of serfdom, although serfdom is still around until she's dead. It will only go away once her son takes over, who looks like Skinny Jeans George Washington. And Joseph II, that is his name, is most famous for his one and only really important thing he did, which is freeing the serfs in Austria. That's great, Joseph. That's so cool. I really like that you're so open. Wait, what? I'm receiving word that Joseph II actually was unsuccessful, and as soon as he died, the serfs were reinserfed, so they were put right back in their previous situation because the landlords were losing money. Okay, well, sorry about that, Joseph. All right, that's art, but I want to hop back to our friends over in England. So let's talk about England for a little bit. Oh, that's right. You get out here, Mr. Oliver. Oi, this is Cousin Chip. I'm from England, jolly old England I am, and I'm here to talk about England I am. And so here is James the First. This right old bloke took over after Elizabeth died. And Elizabeth died in 1603, and she ain't left a single child. Oh, what's the problem then? Better go to her cousins in Scotland? And James is going to bring Scotland into the mainstream. For a long time, the Scottish had been. Is that annoying? I'm sorry. Okay. Chip, you need to leave. Sorry about that. Okay. Anyway, James the First is this guy that is Scottish. The Scottish were seen as being rude. The Scottish were seen as being uncouth, not having manners. I would say nowadays savages. Well, James takes over, and this guy is a wannabe absolutist. He wants to be like Louis the 13th, Henry the Fourth. He doesn't exist yet, but later on, I'm sure he would want to be like Louis the 14th, and he is a really absolutist guy. In fact, he writes a book about it called "The True Law of Free Monarchy." And when Parliament won't go along with him, he actually gets out his book and starts reading it to them. It's like, look, this book says I'm right, and they're all like, you wrote that book, bro. And he's like, well, it's right. So that's what I'm reading. Anyway, James the First does like the other absolutists, tries to reduce the power of the nobles. He reinstitutes the Star Chamber, which had been started by Henry VII, the new monarch, back in the Tudor dynasty. He taxes, despite the fact that the king cannot tax without Parliament's permission, but he tells Parliament to, go away. I'm sure he doesn't use those words. I'm sure it's a little more uncouth. And he will be left alone, So James the First tries to implement absolutism. England could have actually gone absolutist had it been for a successful rule by his son. His son is named Charles the First. Charles literally meaning manly. And Charles the First says, hey guys, you know what we ought to do? We ought to give me total power. And Parliament is all like, nah. So he's like, I'm not going to call you. So he doesn't call Parliament, and he doesn't use them at all. That's another big thing about being an absolutist, is that nobody's checking your power. Nobody's, making sure that you're acting according to the law. There are no laws that pertain to you. So he continues the technically illegal but still collected taxes that his dad had started, and then eventually gets into a fight with Parliament over the whole thing of Ireland. See, Ireland is having a revolt, and part of this is because Ireland is very Catholic, and they never really got into that whole Church of England thing. And here Charles is Scot, and they don't like him, and they don't like him trying to expand his power. And he's like, Parliament, I need money. And they're like, wait. You didn't call me for all this time, and now you want money? I don't think so. He's like, no, baby, it's going to be different this time. I'm sorry. In the past, I was harsh, but now I'm going to be, a good boy, and I'm going to be nice to you. And they're all like, don't know about that. I messed up just now. This is the problem with live reviews, is I can't edit. It's Scotland he has a trouble with. Okay, Peter, you can stay, but you can't spam the chat. So Scotland is the one that he convinced to send in troops, and they were upset because Charles's dad, James, had implemented a new book of common prayer. This is very detailed. You probably don't need to worry about it. But long story short, Parliament gives Charles money. Then there's another revolt, and that is in Ireland. And Charles goes to Parliament again and says, yo, how about some money? And they're like, no, dude, we're worried that you are going to take that army and try to rule as an absolutist where you get rid of Parliament. You have us all killed. And Charles is like, what? No, that totally wasn't my plan. But it kind of was his plan. So a civil war begins. It is called the English Civil War because it is between Parliament and Charles. Charles's forces are called the Royalists, or sometimes the Cavaliers. The parliamentary forces are called the Roundheads. They are called that because their helmets are round. No, you can't be put in a permanent timeout. I can't do that. So, Hawk, that's a great question. Why does he need this money? If you're going to rule without parliament, you need okay. Well, what do you mean? Yeah. He wanted to build a bigger army, sure, but he couldn't. He needs money because he wants to live large. He wants to be, living in a fancy thing, and he wants to a palace. I mean, and he wants to have no limits on him whatsoever. Parliament in England after 1266, after 1213, right? Okay, let's double check that because this is important. I'm going to actually Google right now. The Magna Carta. I say 1213. 15. Like I said, 1215. Let's go back and edit that. Peter wants to be. I know I don't want to block you because if I block you, you go away forever. I can report you, but I'm not going to do that, Peter. All right. So Charles, kind of lost my track there. Sorry. Charles goes to war with Parliament. He loses. He had wanted to rule without Parliament. He wanted the money so he could rule without Parliament because they controlled the purse strings according to the Magna Carta, which had said that all money requests have to be run through Parliament, which is basically the rich people in England, the most notable nobles. He can't, so he goes to war. He fails, loses the English Civil War, loses his head. They chop his head off. He wears 2 shirts because it's a cold day and he doesn't want people to think that he's unmanly and shivering before they chop his head off. They still chop his head off. And then they sew it back on because they're gentlemen and they want him to be brought back to his family so he will look presentable. He is replaced by Oliver Cromwell. Now, they want you to catch the irony in this. The Parliament was worried that Charles I was going to take an army and rule without Parliament. Instead, we end up with Oliver Cromwell, a member of Parliament, ruling with his army and not sharing the power. He doesn't rule on behalf of Parliament. He sets up a dictatorship. So this guy did what he went to war with Charles I to prevent himself from doing, that guy from doing. It's all messed up. Oliver Cromwell, notable for a number of things. He's a Puritan, so he makes a bunch of things illegal, including celebrating Christmas, because Puritans don't celebrate Christmas. Also drinking, dancing, anything that people at that time did that was considered fun was illegal under Oliver Cromwell. He also starts off mercantilism in England. Now, mercantilism was an economic system that started under Louis XIV. And essentially, it says that you should try to make as much money for your country as possible. So enrich yourself and make yourself more powerful, get as much gold as possible, and make everybody else weak. So when you trade, try to trade more stuff than you import. Does that make sense? So like you're trading a lot more out than you are in. For example, the Navigation Acts were passed where you would carry English goods on English ships. So if you wanted to trade with England, that's fine, but you got to do it on an English ship. You don't get to carry it on your own ships. So that's Oliver Cromwell. He dies. They actually will continue the Navigation Act, so that's a long-term effect of Oliver Cromwell. All his crazy Puritan laws are out the window as soon as he's gone because the Parliament will reform and say, "Hey, you're Charles the First son, right?" And Charles the Second, also Charles meaning manly, Charles the Second will say, "Yeah, yeah, I'm named after him. That's me. I'm a Stuart monarch." And they'll say like, "Oh yeah, yeah. What do you think about becoming king?" And he's like, "You guys sort of murdered my dad, and I saw it. I witnessed the murder. So that's kind of messed up." And they're like, "You want to be king or not?" He's like, "Yes." And Charles the Second, he becomes the king. Now, I would not call Charles the Second an absolutist monarch, but I included him here just because he is probably another wannabe, very much like James the First, but without the effectiveness. He works with Parliament. I mean, of course he's going to work with Parliament. Parliament murdered his father. So he's going to be like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, guys, okay, yeah." But secretly makes a deal with France and Louis XIV to re-Catholicize England in exchange for money, because it's all about chasing that paper. And that means, Peter, that means trying to make a lot of money. And Charles II is king during the Great Fire in London. He has numerous mistresses. That's not really important, but it just kind of shows the contrast between the serious Oliver Cromwell and the relatively merry monarch Charles II. In fact, I think we watched a Horrible Histories video about Charles II in class, about the merry monarch. After Charles II is discovered about his secret plot to re-Catholicize England, which of course is very unpopular in Protestant England, he dies. Now, he doesn't die because someone kills him. He dies just because he has good timing and he understands, like, yo, um, you know, this is a good time for me to die. It's just a coincidence, to be honest with you. No, he didn't have 6 wives. 6 wives is Henry VIII. But that is definitely definitely a good thing to know. So Charles II dies. James takes over. Whereas Charles II was maybe kind of like closet Catholic, like maybe not openly so, but he definitely has sympathies. His brother, James II, was a full-on Catholic and proud of it. And Parliament tried to do things. They were like, but no, 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 no. We were trying to get your brother, Charles II, we were trying to get him to sign a thing that said that Catholics can't have official power. And James is like, well, I'm the king. I get rid of that rule. Oh. And he's like, and you know what? Guess what my wife is? And they're like, wonderful. I'm sure she's a great lady. He's like, no, she's pregnant. And they're like, OMG. Because then they got a problem. If James II, a Catholic, has a son that's also Catholic, England is almost certainly going to revert back to being a Catholic country. And they do not want that. Now, this is a little messed up. They don't want to be absolutist. Okay. So you can see that they don't like James II because he wants to be an absolutist and he's a little more strong-willed than Brother Charles. But the real reason they really hate him is because he's a Catholic, and that's discriminatory. And there's no way around that. England is a wonderful place and have a great history, but hatred of Catholics is not cool, guys. So thumbs down on that. They chased James II off in 1688 with something called the blank. Somebody tell me what's that called. I'll describe the rest of the event. James II is replaced by his daughter, whose name is Mary, and her husband, William, who was a Dutch dude. And that will then be the new monarchy. I mean, essentially, Parliament just chooses a new king. This is very gutsy of Parliament because they could have had another civil war. But instead, James II leaves town and goes across the English Channel and lives the rest of his life in the court of Louis XIV. I don't know if he lived in Versailles, but he did at least temporarily visit. I do know that. Okay, knowing what I'm talking about is a good thing. It's called the Glorious Revolution, when they get rid of James II and they move towards a parliamentary, I would say democracy, a parliamentary constitutional monarchy, because this is the English rejection of absolutist principles. France never has this. I told you that with Louis XV, Parliament tries to assert themselves more, and the courts assert themselves more and declare some of his laws invalid and stuff like that. England, over the course of these 4 Stuart monarchs, goes from having a guy who wants to be an absolutist to completely rejecting it and even saying, like, hey, we don't like the king, so we're going to get a new king. And he managed to get away with it. And the symbolism of this is 2 things. Number 1, the parliament is more important than the king. So therefore, not one guy, no, not an absolutist. And also that if they don't like the government, they have the right to change it. And they kind of get a big booster in, okay, Peter, they get a big booster with John Locke, who writes in 1690 about how the people have certain inalienable rights. They have natural rights, he calls them, and that is the right of life. In other words, you shouldn't be able to just kill us all willy-nilly. Peter, do not make me send you off to timeout again. Liberty, which is freedom of speech and stuff like that. Again, Enlightenment ideals. And right to pursue property. Just a second. So James II, gone, replaced. And then after this, you really don't have any English monarchs you really must worry about. Like, there are ones that you could, like George III, who was king during the American Revolution. But honestly, that's more important for American history, ironically, than it is for European. After this, the Parliament is the number 1. And John Locke's idea of, if you don't like your government, let's get rid of it, kind of becomes an unofficial rule that humans have natural rights. And, we should protect our property, and we should, have certain liberties. And the English really develop a national consciousness about this. And I think that this is one of the reasons that the English don't have any revolts in 1848, unlike most of the rest of Europe. Okay, let's get past that. Okay, let's go art of this era of the 17th century. We got Baroque. We kind of talked about that last time in the last review. How about Rococo? Rococo, 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 Rococo. If you listen to Arcade Fire. If there are any Arcade Fire fans out there, hit me up. Anyway, Rococo art is, what if it kept the ideas of Baroque? Everything's big, everything's majestic, but the subject matter wasn't religious. Instead, it was like a bunch of naked people and rich people having fun. It's like, what if the Kardashians made art? I'm not going to say anything else. This one is one example, the Stolen Kiss. It's like this noble woman and probably a noble man. It's like, oh, I must leave. And he's all like, oh, no, baby, you stay. I give you a kiss. He's like, oh, no, you're so bad, Jean-Paul. And this one is probably the most famous. A lot of people like this art. I hate it. But this one is the most likely probably to appear on the test. Rococo is silly, frilly kind of art. It's just cutesy. It's rich people at play. That is a picture of a woman swinging, being pushed in the back by this poor servant. He's like, oh, I'm kicking off my shoe. And he's like, oh, what fun we're having. And no, this man is not a pervo down here. She's wearing like 14 layers of clothing. He's seeing nothing. Anyway, there's that. All right, I have an idea for review. We're going to do it like this. Watch. Everybody will participate. I'm going to keep score, okay? I have a little, do you hear that? I have a little thing, and I'm going to give a prize. I forgot to give Sahak his prize, so I'm going to give Sahak a prize automatically. I'm writing that on here. Sahak prize tomorrow. I don't remember why, but you did something good the other day. And then whoever else participates, I'm going to give scores to. And then whoever has the highest scores at the after this review is going to get points. All right. Richelieu ended Huguenot military and political independence by sieging this city. Anybody? Type your answer quick. First one gets the points. Hopefully Peter's off timeout. Otherwise, because he probably knows this and he's probably like, I'm on timeout. But frankly, you were warned, dude. Nobody knows it? Nobody knows it. What is all that then? Makes me sad then. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It was the city of La Rochelle. And I wouldn't really stress out about this one too much, but I think I would remember it. I would remember La Rochelle was a Protestant Huguenot city that Richelieu took out. All right. Here's another question. Whoever knows the answer, type it as quickly as possible. Louis XIV's famous quote, and I apologize to Armin because I will not get this correct, L'état, c'est moi, literally means this. This review is not going to work if nobody types anything. Let me check real quick to see how many people are actually. We have 5 people. We could at least play with 5 people, guys. I am the state. It means I am the state. All right. The revolution in 60. Oh, this is good that I had this because I forgot to talk about it. Okay, you know what, Sahak? I'm going to give you points for that just because you typed something. Peter, the answer, it was not just me. The state is me. So Sahak 1, everybody else 0. That means 0. This revolution in France took place in 1648 to protest French taxation and the absolutist policies of Louis XIII. Although Louis XIII was dead, and this was a post Louis XIII thing. Anybody? Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, you guys are kind of freaking me out. Okay, this one we didn't talk about here, so okay. It was called the Fronde. The Fronde. Okay, who was Louis XIV's finance minister that came up with the idea of mercantilism? Do, 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 do. Who came up with it? Here's your hint. Not Cardinal Richelieu. That was Louis XIII's advisor. This one is a finance advisor. He has a similar name to a comedian on television. It is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He has a talk show. That one guy, right? No, it's Colbert. Jean-Paul Colbert. Jean-Baptiste Colbert. All right, Richelieu divided France into 32 districts, each under the control of one of these men. What was the job title? Nope, not me. Not me. 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, I already talked about this like an hour ago. Nobody? 1.5, 1.25, just one. Okay, it was the intendants. This review is not going great. I was trying to have a more interactive thing going on, but it's not working. Okay, this man was restored to power in 1660 after Cromwell's death. It wasn't Parliament. Anybody? Anybody know this one? Hey, anybody? You guys are making me a little nervous here because we talked about this one like maybe 15 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago. Nope, that's really close, Peter, but no, that was a good answer. I want to show the people at home. I wish I could show them. I don't think they can see, though, when I click over here. Can you guys see that? Nobody? Okay, we just need to study a little bit more. That's all. It was Charles II. We just talked about him. The Glorious Revolution, what year? What year for the Glorious Revolution? This one's easy. We just talked about this. Nobody? Louis? Louis is not a good answer. You can't answer Louis, Peter. 1688. No, 2000 is wrong. Okay, I'm going to go. You know what, Cassie Carr? I'm giving you the points. I'm giving you the points, Cassie Carr. Cassie.carr.com.org. Good job, Cassie Carr. All right, next one. Sorry, saw how Cassie was too fast on that one. All right, this Constitution was passed by William III and created after James II fled to France. Anybody? This is where they kind of codify all the stuff I was talking about. I just forgot to say the name of it. So it's basically a constitution. It is a very enlightenment-y kind of thing. Anybody know it? Five, four, three, two. Joining text was egg. Peter just typed, joining text was egg. Constitution of the Rights of Man is close, Mia. That's the Declaration of the Rights of Man. That's France, and that's 1789. But that's very close. 5, 4, 3, 2, half, quarter, eighth, 16th, 0. The English Bill of Rights. I mean, you were right there. It's a better answer than joining tax was egg. Charles I appointed this man as archbishop in 1633, provoking a Scottish revolt. This one's a little bit, it's a little bit obscure. But who wrote that Book of Common Prayer that I told you that the Scots were angry about? He's Archbishop William. If you get the last name, I'll give it to you. Archbishop William. It's the Book of Common Prayer. What did he write? And okay, Peter just typed A of drying in. I don't know if that's an answer to this question or if it's just, I mean, it's an interesting answer. Are shoots try out by? Well, I'm not sure this is working too much better than Kahoot. At least with Kahoot, people answer. I've only got one answer here, and it's like some kind of weird haiku. A of drying in, our shoots try out by. No, it's not a haiku. It was William Laud. Again, it's fairly obscure. You might be able to forget that, but I would at least recognize the name. I just want you to be like, oh, yeah, that's right, that one guy. What was the name of James the First's book? This is the one I was talking about, that he went to Parliament. Sahak, I'll get it right there. I'm giving that to you, Sahak, because I don't know how bad my thing is, my delay is. So I'm giving that to you. All right. So this book, he wrote it to proclaim his theories on the divine right of kings. He read it to Parliament. He used it. He wrote it himself, but then tried to use it as evidence that he was right, which really is genius. Try that with your families. I wonder how that'll work. Don't actually do that. I don't want to. And Peter responded, a bit fumed KB. I don't know what that means. Hopefully these aren't like obscene references, but I don't think Peter would do that. I think it's just like poetry in his own style. Nobody remembers this? The true law? Harry Potter. Yes. Harry Potter. Perfect. 1 point for... No, not really. The true law of free monarchy. True law of free monarchy. The Fault in Our Stars. Well, that's a good guess. But sadly, Ivan IV is better known by this name. Here, I'll add some music while you think. Anybody know it? He's better known by this name. Known by this name. Ivan the Fourth. Ivan the Terrible, Mia, for the win. Peter's guess that time was at King Brig vetoed King Hub. That's close, but it's not there. Let's try another one. Peter the Great fought the Great Northern War against this nation. Do you notice I couldn't play the whole Doctor Who thing? It occurred to me that would be a copyright thing, so I didn't want to get in trouble. So I didn't play more than like 5 seconds. All right. Who did he fight against in the Great Northern War? Looking for a warm water port. I know you said terrible, but she was first, Sahak. Move on. It's over. Mia got the point. You have 2. Cassie Carr has 1. Mia has 1. Peter has -3. So who did Peter the Great? Peter the Great. Peter the Great fought against the... Okay, just because you didn't get the point doesn't mean you have a lag. Maybe Mia is just very fast. Okay, so do we have one? Peter the Great fought the Great Northern War against this nation? Nobody so far. Peter says in bug Benai. I don't have my glasses on, so it's just, oh, it's an in. Benai, sorry. I don't. I'm going to go ahead and mark that as a negative score. So Peter now has -4. Anybody else want to guess? Outbuying by. Well, Peter got another one wrong. I'm going to count that as -5. The United Kingdom. No, they are in the north, but they are not the ones that Russia fights with here. It's kind of an unlikely one. Russia did not fight themselves. Peter the Great is from Russia. You can't fight Russia, you silly gooses. The correct answer was not the Netherlands, but actually Peter was pretty close there. Correct answer was the Swedish fish. Oh, Cassie just got it as I was saying it. Deep hurting. All right, what was the first capital of Russia? We know that Peter the Great. My work stuff is coming too late. Well, Sahak, you did say Russia, in fairness. The first capital of Russia, he moves it to St. Petersburg, which of course he acquires as a result of that great Northern War against Sweden. Cassie Carr got that right. Cassie Carr has 2. Sahak has 2. Mia has 1. Peter has -5. He said Netherlands, but that was a reasonable answer, so I did not give him negative points for that. Austria, Swedish. Okay, well, now, I'm not sure if we're just super lagged here. St. Petersburg is where he moved it to. What about before that? It's what it is today.
I love it. Chase that paper, son.
Moscow. Nice job, Cassie Carr. It was indeed Moscow. Whoa, Cody. Cody, do I have a Cody in class? Peter answered something that did not make sense, so I'm going to go ahead and say -6 for him. Okay. Hi, Cody. I don't know who you are, but you seem... I have the lag. We should see a doctor. He was the first Romanov monarch. Computer doctor. He was the first Romanov monarch. Now, remember, Ivan the Terrible, he actually had 2 sons. One, he killed. Oops. The other one was mentally ill and did not make a baby. So there was a time of troubles. And then that time of troubles ends with this guy ascending to the throne. Yes, Sahak, but Cassie said it first. Look, I can go back and I can see. Sahak put yeah, and then Moscow right after Cassie put Moscow. I believe you, Sahak, but Cassie said it first. Okay, who was the first Romanov monarch? After the time of troubles, nobles put aside their war and said, okay, look, we can all agree on this guy. Romanovs will be in power for over 300 years. Alexis. Very close. Peter the Great, no. Let's see. Do we have one in class? No. First Romanov monarch. Jack Robinson's middle name. If you know that. Jack Robinson's middle name. Oh, hey, Cody. Cool. Boris. No. Michael Romanov.
Great job.
Michael Romanov. Mikhail Romanov. Just like Jack Robinson in my period 2. Michael. So Sahak has 3 points. Cassie has 3 points. Mia has 1 point. Peter has -7 by my count at this point. No, I just said the answer to this one. This man is known as the Soldier's King. The Soldier's King. Soldier King. Soldier King. He's a Prussian soldier's king. If it's not Nicholas the First, it's not Michael. That's, you know what? That's a good answer, Peter, but I'm not giving you points. You're still -7. Okay, we've moved on. We're on a different question now. Hope you like the videos, Cody. Hope this review is okay. I had some technical problems here. Frederick William. Oh my goodness, here comes Indiana for the win. Isn't that what he said, Indiana? Yeah, that's where my family's from. If you know any Olivers there, they might actually be related to me, Cody. So if they do, hopefully they're nice. Like Bob's over there, Marcia, a lot of good people. Marcia would be married, so don't remember what her last name is. Okay, next question. The royal family of Prussia's last name. Spelling, not important as long as I can figure it out. Just for fun. We know the Habsburgs are from Austria. The Romanovs are from Russia. The Stuarts and the Tudors before them are both from England. Who is the royal family of Prussia? Oh my goodness, Cody is on fire. Cody's on fire. Absolutely. I'm counting that because that's pretty close. Hohenzollern. That's actually not how you pronounce it. You could say like Hohenzollern. It would be closer. So let me give you a great job. Oh, no.
Great job.
Sorry. Okay. This document, this is going to be the last question. Last question. This document ensured that all Habsburg land passes to the Habsburg heirs, even if that heir is a female. I guess you could say they were sanctioning things and doing it in a certain way. So, of course, the Habsburgs are Austrian, Holy Roman Empire. They're worried maybe that when Maria Theresa takes over, that she will be threatened. She will, of course. She actually will be threatened by Frederick II. Continue phony. Well, I'm not going to take away points for that because those were actually words I could read, Peter, but it's not the right answer. Anyway, Frederick the Great, Frederick II, did actually attack Austria. He ignored this sanction. Starts with a P. It's not a phony sanction, Peter. It's not Peter. It's not the answer either. Here comes the answer. In pragmatic sanction. Nice job, Cody. Not the dress code. That's a good answer too, though. It's the pragmatic sanction. Cody, it looks like you tied. There was a 3-way tie between you and Sahak, Carr, Casserole. So I'm going to give all of you. I'm going to give all of you the win. I'm going to say all of you technically won, but Cody, you're going to have to stop by my classroom to pick it up. So that might be not convenient because it's only a value of about 10, 20 cents. So it was the pragmatic sanction. All right. I am meeting my wife for dinner, and I'm done because that's the last slide. Peter, I'm going to go. So you guys have a nice evening. What I would recommend at this point is I would recommend, here, let me say goodbye. Let me say goodbye. It's so hard to say goodbye to yesterday. Woo! Okay, so I recommend that you use this as kind of a tool. Refresh yourself on the Enlightened Absolutist. Refresh yourself on the various fellas we talked about, and Catherine, who's a lady. Yeah, so go crazy with that. We'll talk again on Saturday at 10 a.m. my time. Kind of early for Cody, but I like that people that aren't even from our school joined us. Hopefully, it was a helpful review. Goodbye.